Hey guys, tonight we're cracking open one of the most casually unhinged chapters in American commercial history. The story of how a lemon-lime soda, launched 2 weeks before the Great Depression, quietly loaded with a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer, accidentally turned an entire nation into an unknowing clinical trial. Not a conspiracy, not a scandal, just a country so desperate to feel okay that it handed a mustachioed man with no medical license a chemistry set and said, "Go ahead, we trust you." If you're genuinely enjoying this kind of slow, darkly funny, slightly unsettling history, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It actually helps a lot. And a huge thank you to one of you for suggesting this topic. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is, and maybe tell me the last wellness product you bought that definitely didn't do what the label claimed. Lights low, fan on, blanket up. Maybe grab a cold drink. Just, check the ingredients first. Have you ever wondered what was actually in your great-grandmother's health tonic? And whether health was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence? Why did an entire era of Americans willingly drink things that contained cocaine, arsenic, and morphine, and describe them as refreshing? Could you genuinely read a label that said lithiated and just? Keep sipping? What does it say about a civilization that its most popular mood stabilizer came in a glass bottle with a lemon on it? Did babies actually drink this? Were the babies fine? Were they maybe suspiciously fine? And seriously, who approved the marketing meeting where someone said, "Give it to infants," and everyone nodded? Congratulations, you just woke up in a pharmacy in the United States, 1929. The counter is polished oak, gleaming under soft light, lined with amber and green glass bottles that look like they contain either medicine or something significantly worse. The man behind it has a moustache he hasn't earned, and a product called Dr. Bliss Brain Restorer that he absolutely formulated himself this morning. There's a new fizzy drink just arrived on the shelf, 2 weeks old, launched into a world that is about to financially collapse, and it has lithium in it. Good luck. You walk into the pharmacy in 1895 looking for something to settle your nerves, or your stomach, or the general unease that comes with being a person in the late 19th century. The pharmacist, a man with a moustache of considerable authority and a medical education that is, to be fair, mostly theoretical, points you toward the soda counter. This is not strange. Medicine and carbonated water share a shelf because no law has yet told them they can't. You sit on a stool. You are about to receive your prescription. Let's talk about what this counter actually looks like. It's polished oak, usually. Marble top. Behind it, shelves lined with amber and green glass bottles carrying names like Dr. Bliss Brain Restorer and Professor Smith's Electric Elixir, which contain, in roughly equal parts, ambition and morphine. The air smells of sugar, menthol, and misplaced confidence. It's the original GNC, except the supplements might actually do something, and some of them might kill you. The pharmacist behind this counter is performing at least 3 jobs simultaneously. He's a chemist, a bartender, and a therapist, none of which he's technically licensed for, but licensing isn't really the current cultural priority. Hal, listen to your complaint, nod slowly, and then carbonate something. The carbonated water itself is considered medicinal. European scientists had been writing papers since the 1700s about mineral springs and their restorative properties, and Americans had imported the concept wholesale and added sugar. The logic was that if fizzy water came from the ground near a famous European spa, then fizzy water made in a Philadelphia back room was basically the same thing. It wasn't, but the fizz was real, and the placebo effect is a powerful pharmaceutical. Now, the drinks on offer aren't just fizzy water. They're fizzy water plus whatever the pharmacist believes will help. And believes is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because there's no FDA requiring evidence of anything. The agency exists in name by this point, but it's in what historians diplomatically call its formative years, which is a polite way of saying it's a confused teenager with a clipboard. The shelves are stocked with tonics containing cocaine from coca leaves, arsenic in carefully calibrated doses, and lithium, which at least has the distinction of being a real pharmaceutical compound still used today. Your pharmacist isn't experimenting recklessly. He's just operating in an environment where reckless experimentation and responsible practice are essentially the same workflow. Of course, you don't know any of this. You know the drink is cold. You know it's fizzing pleasantly. You know the man who handed it to you has an impressive moustache and seemed confident. And in 1895, that combination passes as credentials. You wrap both hands around the glass and take a sip. It's sweet. It's cold. Something in your shoulders drops about half an inch. You're not sure if it's the carbonation, or the sugar, or the thing in the third bottle from the left that the pharmacist didn't mention by name. It doesn't matter. You feel, briefly, better. This is the entire business model. It's also, accidentally, the entire history of wellness marketing, just stated more honestly than anything you'd find on a modern Goop product page. The soda fountain counter is also, importantly, a social space. You're not sitting here alone with your stomach complaint. There are others on neighbouring stools, feet dangling, passing opinions on local news and neighbourhood gossip. Someone's telling a story. Someone else is disagreeing. The pharmacist is half listening and refilling glasses. It's the comment section, but in person. And everyone's a little calmer than they probably should be given what's in the water. You hold the bottle up to the light and squint at the label. It says invigorating. It says restorative. It says recommended by physicians of standing, without naming a single physician. What it does not say is what is actually in it, because there is no law requiring that information. In the 1890s, a product can contain cocaine, morphine, arsenic, or lithium, and the label owes you an explanation of none of that. It can be called Dr. Bliss Brain Restorer by a man named Gerald who has never attended a medical lecture. You thank Gerald. You drink it anyway. Let's talk about the naming. The names alone are doing a tremendous amount of work. Professor Smith's Electric Elixir, Dr. Hammond's Nerve, and Brain Tonic. Celery Cola, which sounds mild until you learn that celery extract is doing the same job cocaine was doing in the previous bottle, just with a friendlier font. These names follow a precise formula. One title that implies a credential, one noun that implies anatomy, and one verb that implies something is about to get dramatically better. It's the Goop of its era, except instead of jade eggs and vitamin pouches, the product is a brown liquid in a corked bottle that smells faintly of camphor and optimism. Now, the word lithiated. You don't know what lithium is. Nobody on your street knows what lithium is. Your pharmacist, Gerald, knows it's a mineral. And he knows it sounds more scientific than salt, and that's really the full extent of the marketing research. But lithiated has a clean, medical syllable count, 4 beats, ends in a vowel, and when it appears on a label next to the words lemon, lime and soda, your brain files it under doctor stuff and moves on. This is how bib label lithiated lemon lime soda gets its name, and nobody asks a single question about the first 2 words. They're just there. Heavy. And confident, professionally unbothered. This is where the patent medicine era really earns its reputation. There are no clinical trials. There are no dosage guidelines. There's no requirement that the dose printed on the label match the dose actually in the bottle, or that there be a label at all beyond something decorative. The FDA exists in the way that a school hall monitor exists, technically present, technically empowered, doing almost nothing about the situation currently unfolding. You could market morphine syrup as a children's cough remedy, call it soothing, print a drawing of a smiling child on the front, and no regulator would arrive to disagree. Someone did exactly that. It sold well. Of course you're not suspicious. You're tired. It's 1903, you've been standing for 11 hours, and the man behind the counter is sliding a cold glass of something lemony and fizzing across polished marble, telling you it refreshes the nerves and restores good humour. The bottle behind him has a label with a crest on it. The crest implies a university. The university doesn't exist. The crest doesn't care. You drink the glass. 15 minutes later, you do feel somewhat better in a smooth, lightly untethered way that you'll attribute to the carbonation and not to the lithium currently adjusting your mood from the inside. Gerald nods. He's seen this before. He writes nothing down. You take your tonic in the morning, as instructed on the label, which says take generously as needed, which is not instructions so much as an open invitation. The tonic is brown. Most tonics are brown. Brown implies seriousness, implies effort, implies that someone arrived at brown as their considered conclusion. It tastes primarily of alcohol, with an aftertaste that is difficult to name but easy to appreciate. You feel, within 20 minutes, considerably better than you did before. This is the entire point. It is also, upon reflection, not particularly mysterious given the ingredients. Let's talk about what's actually in this bottle. Depending on the decade and the product, you're potentially drinking a mild solution of cocaine, morphine, arsenic, or lithium, and that list is not ranked by danger level so much as by how confidently the label announces it. Some bottles don't mention the contents at all. Some mention them proudly. Dr. Bliss's Brain Restorer does not elaborate on how brains are restored. It doesn't have to. The name is doing enough work on its own. Now, the pharmacy where you bought this is worth describing. It's not a pharmacy the way a CVS is a pharmacy. Flickering lights, wall-to-wall lip balm, and a 20-minute wait for a prescription you already called ahead about. No. This is a polished oak counter, gleaming under gas lamps. Shelves, lined with amber and green glass bottles. The air smelling of sugar, menthol, and a confidence that borders on reckless. The pharmacist behind the counter is part chemist, part bartender, and part therapist, and he's unlicensed in at least 2 of those capacities. He has an impressive moustache. He has strong opinions about your constitution. He stirs your tonics with a small wooden implement and says you'll feel right as rain by noon. You believe him. Of course you believe him. He's wearing an apron and standing behind a counter, which in the 1890s is the approximate equivalent of a blue verification checkmark. The setting implies authority. The bottle implies science. The moustache implies experience. None of these things are regulated. This is where carbonated water enters the story. European scientists had spent decades insisting that mineral water, naturally fizzy, pulled from the ground near places with names like Baden-Baden, was genuinely medicinal. It stimulated digestion. It uplifted the spirit. It arrived in America carrying the full authority of continental credibility, which Americans found extremely persuasive and never questioned even slightly. By the time soda fountains appeared in pharmacies, carbonated water was a health product with a respectable pedigree. The fizz wasn't a flavouring. It was the point. It was medicine that had learned to be refreshing, which is a business model that has never really gone away. See, every adaptogen seltzer currently stacked near the checkout at Whole Foods. So you're not drinking for pleasure. You're self-administering. The tonic is your morning regimen, your wellness ritual, your proof that you're taking your health seriously. The fact that it contains cocaine, or lithium, or a quantity of alcohol that would make a modern pharmacist briefly leave their body is, in 1895, a secondary consideration at best. The label says, restorative. You feel restored. The transaction is complete. Meanwhile, the man behind the counter is already preparing something for the woman who came in with a headache and left with a bottle of morphine syrup. She'll be back next week. He knows her order. You describe your symptoms to the pharmacist, who listens with the focused attention of someone who is 1/3 chemist, 1/3 bartender, and 1/3 whatever you need him to be today. He nods. He asks follow-up questions. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Is the problem more of a general weariness or something with a sharper edge? He reaches under the counter and produces a jar of something he has made himself, labelled restorative compound, in his own handwriting. You are paying for this consultation. It is, legally speaking, a medical visit. Legally speaking is doing a lot of work in that sentence. The pharmacy counter is polished oak, gleaming under gas lamps, lined with amber and green glass bottles that catch the light like a very confident stained glass window. The smell is sugar, menthol, and something faintly chemical that nobody is rushing to identify. Jars are arranged by ailment, loosely. Nerves on the left, digestion in the middle, general despair somewhere toward the back. The pharmacist doesn't have a diploma on the wall. He has a moustache and a confident tone, which in 1895 is functionally identical. He's basically the WebMD of his day, except the recommendations are worse and the confidence is higher. You don't come here only when you're ill. You come here because it's where things happen. News arrives here first. Gossip gets refined here into something close to fact. You sit at the marble counter on a tall stool with your feet dangling slightly, and a teenager behind the counter, the soda jerk, which is a real job title and not an insult, slides a glass of something cold and fizzing toward you. The fizz alone feels medicinal. That's not a coincidence. Carbonated water arrived in America, carrying a full European endorsement as a digestive aid and nerve tonic, which means the soda fountain inherited its scientific credibility from actual mineral spring research. It just didn't inherit any of the rigor. This is where the pharmacist's authority gets interesting. He doesn't need to prove the compound works. He needs to perform expertise, and the performance is convincing. He speaks in the measured cadences of a man who has read several pamphlets. He uses the word compound instead of mixture. He says indicated for rather than might help with. The jar gets a label. The label gets a name. The name contains either a doctor's title or the word electric, because both carry equal weight with the average customer in 1902. Dr. Bliss's Brain Restorer, Professor Smith's Electric Elixir. These are real product categories, not parody. Nobody's checking. Of course, the contents are the real story. You're not just getting sugar water. Depending on the year and the compound, you might be getting cocaine, which was a common ingredient in tonics marketed for fatigue and low spirits. You might be getting morphine, listed on the label as soporific extract, because that sounds better. Arsenic appeared in complexion tonics. Lithium showed up in drinks marketed for nervous agitation and mood irregularity, described in advertising copy as a natural mineral salt with a calming influence. None of this requires a prescription. None of it requires a warning. The FDA exists at this point, technically, but it's in its awkward teenage years, present, theoretically in charge, not yet taken seriously by anyone in the room. And yet, the pharmacy counter works. You sat down. Someone listened. Something cold and fizzing was placed in front of you. The glass is cold against your palm. The fizz tickles your nose, and for a few minutes the particular weight of your particular day lifts slightly. The pharmacist nods as you stand to leave, as if the outcome was expected, because as far as he is concerned, it was. You feel better. The jar goes home with you. It sits on the shelf, looking authoritative. Nobody opens it again until next Tuesday. You are prescribed carbonated water, not as a treat, as a treatment. The science, such as it is, holds that the bubbles stimulate digestion, that the fizz encourages the stomach to perform its functions, and that the general sensation of carbonation produces a lifting of the spirits not unlike the effect of fresh mountain air, which most people in this situation cannot afford. European scientists have been pouring mineral water over each other's reputations for decades, and America has absorbed their conclusions enthusiastically, and then doubled the sugar content. You sip your prescribed fizzy water and wait to feel restored. Let's talk about where this idea came from. Because it didn't start at a soda fountain. It started at European spa towns, Baden, Vichy, Bath, where wealthy visitors soaked in mineral springs and declared themselves cured of conditions they probably just needed a vacation from. Physicians prescribed mineral water the way a modern doctor might recommend magnesium supplements, with confidence, without much evidence, and with the quiet understanding that at least it isn't making things worse. America looked at this tradition and saw not a leisure ritual, but a product. If mineral water cured the European aristocracy, carbonated water with added compounds would cure everybody else. The logic is airtight if you don't inspect it. Now, the specific claim being made here is that carbonation itself does something to the human body beyond making you burp, and it does, a little. Carbonated water mildly stimulates the stomach lining. It moves things along. It produces a cool, crisp sensation that the brain interprets as refreshing, which is close enough to restored that the distinction barely matters when you're tired and your feet hurt and there's no aspirin yet. This is less a medical breakthrough and more a lucky accident being sold as one. The goop of the 1890s, except everyone was doing it and nobody had a newsletter. This is where the carbonated water gets interesting, because once you've established that bubbles are medicinal, you can add things to them. The fizz acts as a kind of cover story. It tastes purposeful. It feels clinical. It hisses like something that knows what it's doing. Add a pinch of lithium carbonate and the drink doesn't just refresh you. Ew. It genuinely chemically softens the edges of the afternoon. Add coca leaf extract and you don't just feel better, you feel substantially better. With opinions. The carbonation isn't doing the heavy lifting in either of these cases, but it's a very convincing opening act. Of course, the people drinking these fizzy compounds aren't thinking about pharmacology. They're thinking about the taste, which is sharp and sweet and cold and new, in a way that almost nothing else in their daily experience is new. The soda fountain is, at this point, about as modern a thing as exists in their world. The stainless fixtures, the marble countertop, the teenager who slides your glass without spilling it like some kind of carbonated street magician. You drink your prescribed water, and you feel, if not exactly healed, then at least temporarily convinced that healing is available. That's not nothing. There are people selling that feeling right now in small brown bottles with very clean fonts, and the bottles cost $14, and the main ingredient is also water. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the European spa tradition is fading. The wealthy are finding other vacations. The mineral spring towns are quietly becoming less fashionable, but their central premise, that water, treated correctly, can restore you, has already crossed the ocean and taken up permanent residence in American commercial culture. It won't leave. It'll just keep changing its name. You sit at the counter, and the soda jerk looks at you the way a bartender looks at a regular, reading your mood, your order history, and whether today is a 2-scoop afternoon. He is 17 years old and has more social awareness than your employer. He knows who is dating whom, who had a bad morning, and who needs something sweet and cold and a nod of quiet understanding. He slides your drink toward you before you finish ordering, because he already knows. This is slightly unnerving and deeply comforting in roughly equal measure. Let's talk about what this counter actually is. It's marble-topped and cold to the touch, the kind of surface that communicates cleanliness through sheer density. The stools swivel. The glass shelves behind the soda jerk hold amber and green bottles in neat rows, which look pharmaceutical because they are, essentially, pharmaceutical. The whole setup is the 1920s equivalent of a sweet green, aggressively healthy aesthetics, mild therapeutic claims, and a 16-step process for something you could have made at home. Now, you sit here for an hour without ordering much, the way you now scroll Reddit without meaning to. The local gossip moves down the counter in both directions. The neighborhood argument from this morning has already been summarized, debated, and partially resolved before you finish your first glass. The marble is cold under your elbows. Komsko. Under your elbows. The soda jerk refills your glass without asking, because silence has its own order. Someone 2 stools down is explaining The Widow on Elm Street to someone who already knows about The Widow on Elm Street. Nobody stops them. Of course, during Prohibition, the soda fountain isn't supplementing bar culture. It's replacing it. The bars closed, and people still needed somewhere to sit with a cold glass and stare into the middle distance. The soda fountain stepped forward. It was ready. It had been waiting for this promotion. This is where 7-Up earns its edge. Coca-Cola's got caffeine. Root beer's got sugar. And the faint promise of something that once grew in the ground. But 7-Up has lithium carbonate, which is a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer, which means it isn't competing on flavor alone. It's competing on pharmacology. The tagline is, "Take the ouch out of grouch," which is doing a lot of work in 6 words, more than most modern antidepressant ads, which have to spend 30 seconds listing side effects before they're allowed to show someone flying a kite. Meanwhile, nobody drinking it knows what lithium is. The word lithiated is on the bottle, sitting there confidently between lemon lim and soda, and it reads as science. It reads as doctor approved. It reads as better than whatever you were drinking before. America didn't need a definition. It needed the italics. The soda jerk slides your 7-Up down the counter, and you take a sip, and something in your shoulders drops half an inch. The fizz hits the back of your throat. The cold spreads. There is a particular quality to the afternoon that wasn't there before. A slight smoothing of the edges, a modest goodwill toward things in general. You don't know why. You don't need to know why. You tip a nickel, and the soda jerk nods and already has his eyes on the next customer, because someone else just walked in looking like a 2-glass Thursday. The bars close. It happens overnight, January 17th, 1920, and suddenly the question of where you go after a long week does not have an obvious answer. The soda fountain does. It always has. It just wasn't the first choice before, because the first choice had whiskey in it. Now, the marble counter at the pharmacy is the most socially active surface in your neighbourhood, and the soda jerk is the closest thing to a bartender the law will permit. You bring your complaints and your hat. He hands you something cold and fizzy. It's fine. It's mostly fine. Let's talk about what the soda fountain actually is at this point. It's not a diner. It's not a bar. It's something in between. A counter where you can sit, order something fizzy, and talk to whoever's unlucky enough to be seated next to you. The marble top is cold under your elbows. The overhead fans move the air without cooling it meaningfully. Someone 2 stools down is explaining their landlord situation to a teenager who is paid to pretend, to listen. This is, essentially, Twitter, but with better posture. Now, the soda jerk. He's 19, maybe 20, wearing a white apron that was clean this morning. His entire job is to fill glasses, wipe the counter, and absorb the emotional spillover of a neighbourhood that has nowhere else to put it. He's heard about your brother-in-law. He's heard about the price of coal. He's heard things no 19-year-old should have to hear on a Tuesday, and yet he keeps the glasses full and nods at the right moments, which is functionally the same skill set as a licensed therapist, except he's paid in tips and doesn't have to take notes. 7-Up arrives into this environment and fits like it was designed for it, which, in a way, it was, because it isn't just offering carbonation. It's offering carbonation plus lithium carbonate, a pharmaceutical mood stabilizer, at a dose just high enough to take the edge off a long week without requiring paperwork or a prescription. You sit down tense. You finish the glass. Something settles. You can't explain it, and you don't try. You order another. The soda jerk refills without comment. This is the least examined wellness program in American history, and it's running through the beverage aisle. Of course, the soda fountain's rise during Prohibition isn't accidental. The bar had a function: social ritual, mild sedation, a reason to leave the house, and Prohibition removed the sedation without removing the need. The soda fountain stepped into that gap holding a glass of something fizzy, something cold, something that tasted faintly medicinal in a reassuring way. 7-Up's tagline is "refreshes you when tired, nervous, or blue." The whiskey's tagline was not written down, but it covered the same territory. 7-Up just had better lawyers and a distribution deal. Meanwhile, the soda fountain counter is doing everything the neighborhood bar used to do, just louder and with more children present. News travels here. Gossip travels faster. You find out who's hiring, who's leaving, who's been seen where with whom. You meet people. You make plans. Someone slides a note down the counter that wasn't meant for you, and you pretend you didn't read it, and everyone knows you did. The counter doesn't judge. It's just cold marble holding still while everything above it is in motion. You learn the news at the counter, not from a newspaper, though someone usually has one, but from the accumulated intelligence of everyone who has sat on these stools today before you. The soda jerk is the node. He listens to everyone and tells nothing outright, but if you pay attention to what he laughs at and what he doesn't, you can reconstruct most of what happened in a 3-block radius since Tuesday. Someone's daughter is engaged. Cones. Someone's husband hasn't been home since Thursday. The counter settles nothing, but accounts for everything. It is functionally the town's central processing unit. Let's talk about what the soda jerk actually does, because his job description is doing a lot of heavy lifting. He's mixing your 7-Up, yes. He's also absorbing your concerns about the price of flour, nodding at your theory about the neighbour's new car, and managing the emotional temperature of everyone simultaneously perched on his stools. It's a LinkedIn profile that would simply read, bartender, therapist, local historian, chemist, and someone who hasn't sat down since 8 this morning. He does all of this while the carbonation hisses and the ice clinks and the counter stays cold and marble and impartial. Now, the counter itself has opinions. It doesn't volunteer them. But it's heard everything. The first dates where nobody knew what to say. The arguments that stopped just short of becoming something worse. The quiet order placed by the man who comes in every Thursday and never talks to anyone. The counter has absorbed more community grief than any institution operating in this zip code, and it doesn't charge by the hour. It charges 15 cents for a 7-Up, which, if you're doing the math, includes a measurable dose of pharmaceutical-grade lithium carbonate, meaning this is less a refreshment counter and more a neighborhood mood stabilization clinic with better stools. This is where the whole thing gets quietly impressive. The soda fountain is running Reddit threads, group chats, a therapist with a 6-week wait list, and a very specific type of friend who picks up on the second ring, all compressed into one marble counter, and one teenager who learned to read a room faster than most executives ever will. You sit down. You order. Someone 2 stools over starts talking. You don't know them. By the time your glass is empty, you know their brother-in-law's name and something about a disputed will. The lithium is helping. Nobody's saying that out loud. Of course, the newspaper on the end of the counter is technically there. Someone brought it in. Someone else has already read the parts they wanted and left it folded wrong. The headlines are real. The war is real. The stock prices are real. But the counter curates what matters. Which stories get repeated, which get dismissed, which make the soda jerk actually stop wiping the glass for a second. That editorial pause is worth more than the whole front page. It's the algorithm, but analog, and run by someone with a genuine stake in the neighborhood. The glass goes down in front of you. The fizz settles, someone else walks in, and the whole system recalibrates slightly without missing a beat. It is 1929, and a new bottle has appeared on the counter. Green glass, lemon-lime label, a name that sounds cheerful, in the way that names invented by marketing departments in moments of genuine optimism tend to sound cheerful. The pharmacist mentions that it is lithiated, which he says as though it is a selling point, because it is. You don't know what lithium is. Very few people do, but the word sounds substantial. It sounds like something a doctor would say in a tone of measured confidence. You buy the bottle. The stock market collapses 11 weeks later, and you buy another. Let's talk about the full name, because it deserves a moment. The drink's complete original name is bib label lithiated lemon lime soda. That's not a beverage. That's a prescription form with carbonation. Modern energy drinks name themselves things like Rain and Monster and act like they invented the concept of putting something alarming in a can. But bib label lithiated lemon lime soda put the alarming thing right there in the title, in the 19th word, and called it a feature. The lithium carbonate inside is real, not decorative, not trace, the kind that, today, a psychiatrist prescribes for bipolar disorder while running blood work every 3 months, because the therapeutic window is narrow and the side effects are not optional. In 1929, it's in your soda at a pharmacy. On a Tuesday, the bottle costs less than a sandwich. Now, the timing of this launch is either terrible or genius, depending on whether you're the drinker or the shareholder. The Great Depression is about to arrive with all the warmth of a foreclosure notice. People are about to need exactly what this bottle quietly provides, a chemical edge against the specific despair of watching everything collapse. The soda doesn't know this, of course. It just sits on the counter in its green glass, keeping its opinions to itself, waiting to be purchased by someone having a slightly worse Tuesday than yesterday. The marketing language stays carefully vague. Nobody's claiming a cure. The label says things like refreshes you when tired, nervous, or blue, which is the 1929 version of a wellness influencer posting about adaptogens. Specific enough to sound intentional, vague enough to survive a lawsuit. The slogan "Take the ouch out of grouch" is printed on enough surfaces that you've seen it 3 times before lunch. You don't interrogate it. The grouch does have an out. The ouch is the depression. The bottle is cold. Meanwhile, the ads are already running in magazines between corset promotions and Ford car spreads. A smiling man in a tie that's still somehow straight at the end of the workday. A wife who is glowing, not frazzled. Children who are tidy. A dog that is calmer than most modern adults, you know. The tagline reads, "For health and good cheer," and you look at your own kitchen and feel the gap between these 2 rooms like a physical weight. You open a bottle, the fizz tickles your nose, the gap narrows, slightly, for reasons you can't name and wouldn't think to question. The full name of the drink you are holding is bib label lithiated lemon lime soda. You say it out loud. It takes a full breath and a half. It sounds less like a beverage and more like something a judge reads aloud before delivering a verdict. Lithiated sits right there in the middle as both a descriptor and a promise, flanked by bib label, which refers to the paper label on the bottleneck and does considerable work for a compound with no apparent meaning, and lemon lime, which is at least accurate. You feel you've earned a drink just by finishing the name. Let's talk about what lithiated actually meant to a 1929 consumer. It didn't mean pharmaceutical-grade psychiatric medication. It meant doctor-adjacent. It meant science is involved, and you don't need to know which kind. It's the same energy as a modern supplement bottle printing clinically studied in bold type, where the study in question involved 12 people and a stopwatch. You see the word, your brain says approved, and your hand reaches for your wallet. You don't ask follow-up questions. The word has already left the room. Now, the name also didn't last. By the time the drink shortened itself to 7, up in the mid-1930s, it had performed one of the more elegant corporate rebranding maneuvers in American history. Gone. The full pharmacological confession. Remaining, a cheerful number, an ambiguous up, and 0 questions. Nobody changed the formula yet. They just stopped announcing it. That's roughly the same move as when a restaurant quietly removes the calorie count from the menu but keeps the portion size identical. Same drink. Friendlier face. So, the bib label portion, for its part, refers to the distinctive foil neck label, the bib, that wrapped the bottle's throat like a cravat on a man who wanted to be taken seriously at a dinner party he wasn't invited to. It communicated premium. It communicated this is not the soda your farmhand drinks. The bottle itself had opinions about your social standing, and those opinions were mostly favourable toward anyone who could afford opinions. Of course, the word doing the real work was still lithiated, because in 1929, lithiated scanned as vaguely European and scientifically credentialed, the way probiotic scans today, the kind of word that sounds like it belongs in a laboratory and ends up in a grocery store aisle between the kombucha and the overpriced sparkling water. You didn't need to know what it meant. You needed to feel like whoever bottled this did. That was enough. It's always been enough. And yet the name was also quietly, completely honest. Not honest in the sense of forthcoming or transparent, but honest in the sense that every ingredient was right there in the title. Lithiated, lemon lime, soda. The bottle told you what was inside, with the calm confidence of a product that assumed you'd either not notice or not mind. It wasn't hiding. It just wasn't explaining. In 1929, nobody sent a follow-up letter asking for clarification. The bottle filed no corrections. Everyone moved on. You set the bottle down on the counter. The foil bib catches the light. The name is gone now, replaced by something shorter and friendlier, and containing significantly fewer syllables and no pharmaceutical disclosures. Somewhere between 1929 and the name change, the drink decided to stop introducing itself properly. Nobody wrote in to complain. You open a magazine, and the 7-Up advertisement is in the center spread, which means someone paid for placement. The family in the illustration has never experienced a difficult afternoon. The father's tie is still on. The mother is glowing in a way that suggests either contentment or very good lighting. The children are still. The copy reads for health and good cheer, and then, in smaller text, something about doctors recommending it for stomach comfort and restored good humour. It doesn't say which doctors. It doesn't say how many. The word doctors is in the sentence, though, and that's what will stay with you. The advertisement isn't claiming 7-Up cures anything. It isn't saying the word medicine. It says wholesome. It says stomach comfort. It says good cheer. The lawyers reviewed this and went home at a normal hour. This is the advertising equivalent of a LinkedIn profile that lists visionary under skills. Nothing is provably false. Everything is strongly implied. The slogan, "Take the ouch out of grouch," appears in some editions. That's a real sentence someone wrote, approved, and printed at scale. It's aimed at tired workers, at housewives somewhere between their third and fourth core of the morning, at students who've been staring at a textbook long enough for the letters to lose meaning. The ad doesn't say 7-Up contains a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer currently used to treat bipolar disorder. It says grouch, neat, contained, cheerful, accurate, technically, in the same way a Goop product description is accurate if you read it very slowly and assume no prior knowledge of chemistry. And then there's the baby. Some editions of the 7-Up advertisement show a smiling infant clutching a glass of the stuff. The copy reads so pure, so wholesome, you can give it to babies. This isn't a metaphor, this is a printed claim in a nationally distributed publication. The baby appears happy. The baby is also, presumably, receiving a small dose of lithium carbonate, which is currently a schedule-level prescription drug in most countries and requires regular blood monitoring in adult patients. The baby doesn't know this. Nobody in the ad does. Everyone is smiling. Now, the doctors recommend language sits in the sentence like a man in a white coat who doesn't speak and doesn't take questions. You don't see the doctors. You don't get their names. There's just the word positioned next to stomach, and then the sentence ends and moves on before you can raise your hand. There's a word for this technique. Several words, actually, and at least one of them appears in a marketing textbook alongside a bar graph. The FDA doesn't yet exist in a capacity that would find this inconvenient. The sentence stands. Nobody asks it to leave. Meanwhile, the family in the illustration keeps glowing. The father's tie is still on, at what appears to be dinner. The children haven't moved. The mother hasn't sat down. The 7-Up bottle sits at the center of the table like a very small carbonated household god, and everybody's happy. The ad says so, right there at the bottom. Everybody's happy when there's plenty of 7-Up. You read that sentence once, and it sounds like a promise. You read it twice, and it sounds like a condition. The advertisement says you can give it to babies. The exact copy is so pure, so wholesome, you can give it to babies. And there is a photograph of an infant who appears to be in excellent spirits next to a bottle of 7-Up. You are a parent in 1935 and the baby has been fussy and the usual remedies have not resolved the situation, and this advertisement has a medical adjacent register that you find reassuring in the specific way that official-sounding language is reassuring when you are tired and out of options. You pour a small amount into a glass. The baby accepts it. The baby is calmer. You keep the bottle in the icebox. Hold them. Now, let's be clear about what has just happened. You've given your infant a carbonated beverage containing lithium carbonate, a pharmaceutical compound that in 2024 requires a prescription, a blood test, and a follow-up appointment with a specialist. In 1935, it required a trip to the icebox. The baby didn't file a complaint. Nobody called anyone. The ad said wholesome, and wholesome it was, and the baby is quiet. And that is the end of the analysis. There's no FDA intervention looming. There's no warning label to read, because warning labels aren't a requirement yet. The closest thing to consumer protection is a neighbor telling you that Dr. Bliss Brain Restorer gave her a rash, but Dr. Bliss Brain Restorer isn't 7-Up, and 7-Up has a photograph of a baby on it. Case closed. You're not reckless. You're a reasonable person, making a reasonable decision with the available information, which is an ad in a magazine and a quiet baby. That's the whole data set. The ad has a smiling infant and the implied endorsement of American Medical Authority, which is basically a lifestyle blogger with a sponsorship disclosure, except the blogger is 8 months old and cannot be held for comment. The copy doesn't say contains lithium. It says pure. It says wholesome. It says babies. You are not meant to ask follow-up questions. Follow-up questions are not part of the format. Of course, you're not alone in this. Across the country, tired parents are doing the same math. Fussy baby plus authoritative magazine copy plus one small glass equals a calmer afternoon. The lithium helps. It genuinely helps. That's the uncomfortable part. Not that the product was fraudulent, but that it worked. And nobody was tracking why, and the company wasn't volunteering the information. The bottle just sits in the icebox, doing its job, radiating quiet competence. Meanwhile, the baby grows up. You keep buying 7-Up. The family develops what you'd describe as a preference, a brand loyalty that feels inexplicable but sturdy, the kind Coca-Cola now spends 9 figures a year trying to manufacture artificially. The lemon-lime taste becomes the taste of calm, of things being okay, of the baby finally, mercifully, sleeping. Your brain files this under comfort, not chemistry, because you don't have the vocabulary for the other option, and the icebox doesn't offer one. The bottle hisses when you open it. That sound becomes part of the deal. Specific, small, and quietly trusted. You are a housewife in 1937, and 7-Up has decided, through its advertising department, that you are its primary audience. The ads understand your schedule with a specificity that would be flattering if it were not also a sales pitch. The cooking and the cleaning, and the children, and the husband who arrives home tired into a house where the work has not stopped, all of this is visible in the advertisement, just arranged more attractively. The solution offered is a lemon-lime soda with a restorative mineral base. You keep a few bottles in the icebox. You pour one in the afternoon, around the time the third thing of the day goes wrong. Let's talk about the ads themselves. They don't promise you rest. They don't promise you help. They promise you a restored sense of good humour, which is a completely different product, and one that requires considerably less structural change. The copy reads like a very chipper friend who has decided the problem is your attitude. Take the ouch out of grouch, it says, above a drawing of a woman who looks nothing like you and has clearly never peeled a potato. She's holding the bottle like a trophy. Her apron is decorative. Now, the 7-Up marketing team in 1937 didn't invent this approach. They're just very good at it. The language borrows the authority of medicine, restorative, wholesome, settles the nerves, without technically making a claim anyone could dispute. It's the functional equivalent of a modern wellness brand writing, supports clarity on a $14 water bottle and technically not lying. The ads mention doctors. They don't name them. You don't ask. And the thing is, it works. Not just as advertising. The lithium carbonate in the bottle is pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilization. When you pour that glass in the afternoon, and the carbonation hisses up over chipped ice, and the first cold, sharp sip hits the back of your throat, something genuinely settles. You didn't know why. The company didn't explain why. Cause and effect were both present, and nobody introduced them. You just knew that the afternoon felt slightly more manageable after the bottle than before it. Meanwhile, across town, other housewives are doing the same thing, at roughly the same hour. Nobody organised this. There's no group chat, no neighbourhood newsletter. It's more like the 1930s version of everyone quietly opening the same app when the day gets difficult, except the app contains a clinically active compound and costs 15 cents. The soda jerk at the pharmacy counter has noticed the afternoon rush. He doesn't remark on it. He slides the bottles across the counter and makes correct change. Of course, none of the ads mention lithium. They mention sparkle, they mention refreshment, they show the impossibly tidy family, dad's tie still on, mum glowing, children arranged quietly like props, all sharing a bottle around a table where nothing appears to have burned and nobody is crying. You look at this image and feel, briefly, like you are being understood and lied to in equal measure. You drink the soda anyway. The afternoon improves marginally. The fourth thing that goes wrong is somehow easier than the third. The bottle goes back in the icebox. You don't pour a second one. Not because anyone told you not to. There are no guidelines, no labels, no suggested serving size for your daily lithium intake, but because one is enough. The afternoon finds its footing. The kitchen reassembles itself in your attention. The soda doesn't fix anything. It just makes the unfixed things feel briefly less urgent. That distinction doesn't appear in the ad copy. You are working a job you're grateful to still have in a decade, when the fact of employment isn't something to take for granted, and the shift is long, and the foreman has opinions about the pace, and the break table has one chair that everyone is quietly competing for. Someone brings a 7-Up to the break table, and the display advertisement by the vending area says it's for the tired worker who requires calm and clarity. That's a description of you. You take a bottle. The lithium, which you have no reason to know is present, begins to do the thing it does, which isn't dramatic and doesn't announce itself. Let's talk about what calm and clarity actually means in 1935. It doesn't mean a mindfulness app. It doesn't mean a scheduled breathing exercise or a calm subscription and a designated wellness corner of your apartment. It means your shoulders drop approximately half an inch. It means the foreman's voice registers at a slightly lower frequency. The edge that's been sitting behind your eyes since 6 in the morning softens, not completely, but enough. You finish the bottle. You go back to work. The afternoon is, against all available evidence, survivable. The ads targeting you aren't subtle, but they aren't aggressive either. They borrow the quiet authority of the medical establishment, not quite claiming to cure anything, but placing doctors in the margins, nodding approvingly, using words like restorative and tonic, the way a modern energy drink prints, supports focus in small font, and hopes you don't ask what that means. You're tired. You don't want a promise. You want permission to sit down, permission to feel better, permission to believe the bottle in your hand is doing something useful. The bottle, for its part, has already decided it's helping and isn't taking questions. You don't ask any. Now, the lithium isn't delivering the kind of effect you'd read about in a clinical study. You're not stabilized in a pharmaceutical sense. You're not transformed. You're just leveled. The biochemical equivalent of a spreadsheet that was throwing errors, suddenly deciding to load correctly. The specific mechanism is invisible to you. What's visible is that Tuesdays feel marginally less like Tuesdays. That's enough. You buy another bottle on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the man selling those bottles has done something quietly remarkable, which is position a pharmaceutical-grade compound as a refreshment. It's the Gatorade playbook, except Gatorade tells you what's in it. 7-Up just calls it a lemon-lime soda and lets the compound do its quiet institutional work across break tables, lunch counters, and factory floors from coast to coast. An accidental clinical trial with several million participants and no informed consent forms, no IRB approval, no follow-up study. The subjects just went back to work. Of course, the foreman still has opinions about the pace. The chair at the break table is still contested. The shift ends when it ends, and not a minute before. But you've noticed, and you won't articulate this to anyone because the vocabulary doesn't exist yet, that the second half of the shift lands differently when there's been a 7-Up somewhere in the middle of it. You don't know why. You don't need to know why. This is 1935, and the bar for good enough has been set remarkably low by recent events. The bottle sits empty on the break table. Someone else picks it up and reads the label. For health and good cheer, it says. They set it back down. Nobody disagrees. You are studying for an examination you cannot afford to fail in both an academic and a financial sense, and the notes you wrote 3 days ago have become less legible in ways that are partly handwriting and partly the state you were in when you wrote them. The kitchen table is covered. The lamp is on. Someone mentioned that 7-Up helps with concentration, and the advertisement you saw last week used the phrase mental clarity in a context that implied it was a product feature and not just a word. You pour a glass over ice. You arrange the notes. The lithium, which the label does not explain, begins its gradual work in the background of the evening. Let's talk about what mental clarity means in 1935, because it doesn't mean what a modern ginkgo biloba supplement label means when it says it. It means you'd like to stop feeling the particular kind of frantic that comes from owing money, sleeping badly, and being 22 in an economy that's treating you like an optional feature. The advertisement didn't promise you'd pass the exam. It promised something adjacent to okay. The bottle just sits there on the counter, confident, asking nothing, offering nothing you can quite name. 7-Up prints, you like it likes you, on the label. The label does not elaborate. The soda sits next to the lamp, sweating quietly onto a handout you haven't read. You read it now. Something about the evening has shifted, not dramatically, not in a way you'd describe to anyone, but the notes seem slightly less hostile and the handwriting slightly more decipherable than 10 minutes ago. This is the lithium carbonate doing what lithium carbonate does, which is essentially acting as a neurological volume knob, turning the static down a few degrees. It's the original noise-cancelling headphone. Bose doesn't put it in theirs, but someone once did put it in a lemon-lime soda, and the effect was similar enough. Now, the advertising copy didn't say any of that. It said things like clear-headed and refreshed, and the wholesome choice for the busy student. A modern liquid IV campaign uses the same bright citrus colour, the same implication that focus is something you drink rather than something you develop, the same aggressively optimistic font. The difference is that liquid IV is offering electrolytes. 7-Up was offering a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabiliser. One of those is more interesting. Of course you don't know that. You're not thinking about active compounds. You're thinking about the exam and the rent and the 3 chapters you haven't started. The soda is cold. The lamp is warm. The room has stopped feeling quite so much like a problem and started feeling more like a room with a table in it where studying is possible. This is, pharmacologically speaking, a success. Not a dramatic one. The Adderall generation would find it underwhelming. But in 1935, the bar for chemical assistance you didn't ask for but are grateful for is set considerably lower, and 7-Up is clearing it. You write a note in the margin. It's legible. You underline something. The glass is half empty or half full, depending on whether the lithium has fully kicked in yet, which is actually a meaningful variable here and not just a figure of speech. The carbon dioxide hisses softly as you set the glass back down. The lamp buzzes at a frequency that you've stopped noticing. Outside, it's the depression. In here, it's just Tuesday evening, and the notes are starting to make sense. The advertisement says a doctor recommends it, and you pause on that sentence the way you pause when something sounds right but cannot quite be checked. You know one doctor. He charges more per visit than a week's groceries, and you are fairly confident he is not the doctor referenced in the copy. But the endorsement is there in a serif font that implies it has been carefully verified, and the surrounding language has been chosen with the precision of someone who knows what a medical claim would legally require and has found the adjacent territory. Widely regarded. Commonly advised by physicians. Known to restore. You buy another bottle. The language has done its work. Let's talk about what that language actually is. There's no named physician, no institution, no study with a sample size or a methodology or a date. What there is a testimonial from a man in an ad who is depicted wearing a white coat and has the haircut of someone who went to school for a long time. The FDA, at this point in American history, is less a regulatory body than a suggestion. There are no labeling laws requiring truth. There are no clinical trial requirements for a product calling itself a tonic. You could call something Dr. Bliss Brain Restorer, hand letter it onto a green glass bottle, and sell it out of a pharmacy without a single person in any office anywhere asking a single clarifying question. The Goop website, for the record, has more hoops. Now, the system runs on confidence, not documentation. You read about European mineral water cures. You decide America needs the same certainty in a domestic bottle. You name it after a doctor who may or may not exist. And you print the label before anyone can stop you. Commonly advised by physicians doesn't say which physicians or when or for what. Known to restore doesn't say known by whom. The passive voice is doing enormous structural work in these sentences. Your local congressman could learn something. This is where the soda fountain setting makes the whole arrangement feel legitimate. You're not buying a bottle from a stranger in an alley. You're sitting on a marble stool at a polished oak counter inside a pharmacy, and behind the counter there are shelves of amber and green glass bottles arranged by height, and the man serving you is wearing a white apron, and the whole room smells faintly of menthol and sugar and institutional confidence. The soda jerk is part bartender, part neighbour, part de facto pharmacist. He slides the glass down the counter with a knowing look. He has, at various points this week, served the same drink to a tired mother, a man with a headache, and a child with an upset stomach. The endorsement isn't coming from a cited journal. Kinouimi Kier. Fiuum Hextry Jeedles. It's coming from the fact that everyone you know has been in this room, and none of them have died. Of course, 7-Up is also working with an ingredient that is actually doing something. The lithium carbonate in the bottle is a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer, the same compound that's in a modern prescription for bipolar disorder, handed out today with a pamphlet and a follow-up appointment. At the soda fountain, it comes with chipped ice and a paper straw. You don't know that. The ad doesn't say that. The ad says for health and good cheer, and take the ouch out of grouch, which is either the most innocent marketing slogan ever written, or the most efficient one, depending on how you count pharmaceutical outcomes. You finish the glass. The room does seem, somehow, more manageable than it did 20 minutes ago. You assume it's the carbonation. You are in a mood. Not a catastrophic mood, nothing has gone specifically, dramatically wrong, but the accumulated weight of a Wednesday in which everything has gone mildly, persistently sideways has produced a state that the 7-Up advertising team has anticipated. Their slogan is "Take the ouch out of grouch," which is 5 words that should not work as well as they do on a person standing in front of an open icebox at 3 in the afternoon. You take out the bottle, you pour a glass. You are, in this moment, self-prescribing a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer that was placed in your icebox by a beverage company with no medical license. The afternoon proceeds. Let's talk about who else is doing this. Tired workers are doing this. Housewives are doing this. Students staring at textbooks that won't cooperate are doing this. A 1930s 7-Up ad targets all of you by name, essentially running copy that reads like a doctor's note written by someone who has never met a doctor but has watched several people look concerned while holding clipboards. The ads promise calm, clarity, good cheer. The drink doesn't claim to be medicine. It just shows up with all the vocabulary of medicine and waits. Now, the slogan "Take the ouch out of grouch" is doing a specific job here. It's acknowledging your bad mood in print, which no one in 1935 does, because acknowledging a bad mood in public is roughly equivalent to announcing you haven't been sleeping. It's the emotional equivalent of a wellness influencer sliding into your notifications at exactly the wrong moment with something that almost makes sense. You don't fully believe it, and yet the glass is cold, and the fizz is sharp, and something in the afternoon actually does shift slightly to the left of terrible. This is where the lithium carbonate stops being a curiosity and starts being a variable. It's a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer, the same compound doctors prescribe today for bipolar disorder. You didn't know it was in there, and the beverage company didn't advertise it by name, and yet the Wednesday grouch has a measurable reason to ease. Not a placebo, not suggestion. An actual compound doing an actual thing in your actual bloodstream while you stand in the kitchen in your house dress deciding whether to start dinner. Of course you're not alone in this kitchen. Across the country, in thousands of identical kitchens and soda fountain stools and factory break rooms, people are taking the same sip and experiencing the same mild, inexplicable lift. It's the largest uncontrolled clinical trial in American history. No consent forms, no study design, no IRB approval, which wasn't a concept yet, but still, just a nation of grouchy people and a lemon-lime soda that was, quietly, doing something real. The sample size is the entire country, and the advertising knew the mood was real, even if it didn't know the mechanism. Everybody's happy when there's plenty of 7-Up, one campaign declares, over a photograph of a family so implausibly tidy they look like they've been ironed. Dad's tie is still on. Mum is glowing. The children are silent, which in any era is the clearest sign that something pharmaceutical is occurring. The bottle sits in the centre of the table like a polite guest who has improved the entire evening without being introduced. You finish the glass. The Wednesday doesn't disappear. It just becomes slightly more manageable, which is all anyone has ever really asked of an afternoon. Prohibition ended in 1933, which means alcohol is legally available again, but the habit of the soda fountain has entered the household in ways that don't entirely step back. At dinner you pour 7-Up for the table. The children get it. The adults get it. The bottle is passed the way the milk used to be passed. The campaign slogan running in the magazines is, "Everybody's happy when there's plenty of 7-Up," and tonight, against measurable odds, everybody is relatively happy, or at least quieter than usual, which in a household running on depression-era tension is a meaningful distinction. Whether this is the lithium, or the dinner, or simple exhaustion, is not a question the table is equipped to answer. Let's talk about what the table looks like. Dad's tie is still on, which means he made an effort. Mum's hair is set. The children are occupying chairs rather than actively fleeing them, which counts as good behaviour in 1935. There's a casserole. There's a bottle of 7-Up, catching the light, green glass, a faint citrus hiss when the cap comes off, and something in the room shifts almost immediately, not dramatically, not cinematically, just slightly. The shoulders drop half an inch. Nobody mentions it. The calm is not discussed at dinner. It's just served. Now, the ads have primed you for exactly this. Full-page spreads in Good Housekeeping showing a family so impossibly tidy they'd fail a background check. Dad composed. Mum, luminous. Children still. The bottle centered on the table like a trophy for surviving the week. The copy reads for health and good cheer, which is doing a lot of work as a sentence, but it sounds reasonable enough that nobody asks follow-up questions. The family in the ad has no visible problems, perfect posture, and a casserole that appears to have been ironed. You look at it briefly, then look at your own table, then look back at the casserole. The casserole does not look back. Shatlinder called a two-duff. The casserole does not look back. It just sits there, aware of the comparison. Of course, the ads also say you can give this to babies. There's a 1935 spread with a smiling infant gripping a glass, captioned so pure, so wholesome, which today would end careers and launch congressional hearings. In 1935, it launches a product loyalty so durable it outlasts the Depression itself. You don't question it. The magazine said, wholesome. The baby looks happy. The baby is, in fact, probably fine, which is either reassuring or the most accidentally lucky public health outcome in American beverage history. Meanwhile, across the table, something the ads never show is also happening. Someone had a hard week. Someone's job is uncertain. The radio earlier carried news that wasn't good, the way the radio always carries news that isn't good in this decade. And yet the bottle gets passed again, the carbonation catches the light, and for 45 minutes the family dinner is functional, bordering, in places, unpleasant. The Waltons couldn't have scripted it better, except the secret ingredient on Walton's Mountain wasn't lithium carbonate. And yours, quietly, is. You'll pour it again next week, and the week after. The green bottle becomes part of what dinner looks like, the same way the salt shaker does, the same way the particular creak of the chair closest to the window does. It does not announce itself. It does not need to. It just appears on the table each evening, hissing softly, already knowing it's staying. You are at a social gathering in 1938 and you are not drinking, for reasons that are yours and not the gathering's business, and the social architecture of this decision is more complicated than the decision itself. Someone always notices. Someone always asks. 7-Up is the answer to this problem in the way that the right tool is the answer to the right problem. It comes in a glass. It has carbonation and colour. It requires no explanation at the bar. The soda jerk serves it with the same motion he uses for everything else. You hold it the way you would hold any drink. Nobody asks. The lithium, as usual, does not introduce itself. Let's talk about what it means to have a drink that performs as a drink without being a drink. In 1938, there's no sparkling water with a branded label to hold at a party, so people stop asking if you're okay. There's no LaCroix in a slim can acting as a social passport. There's 7-Up, cold and pale gold in a glass, and it does exactly the same job with considerably more pharmaceutical support. You sip it. Someone across the room relaxes slightly, apparently satisfied that you've made a choice. The glass is doing most of the work. The glass has always been doing most of the work. The soda jerk is a key part of this. He's not just pouring drinks, he's running a low-stakes social office from behind a marble counter, part bartender, part pharmacist, part person who has heard every problem in a 3-block radius. He doesn't ask what's wrong. He slides the glass over and wipes the counter and moves on. This is the service model that LinkedIn has never been able to replicate. You sit on the stool. The ice shifts. The carbonation hisses. He's already helping someone else. Now, 7-Up understood this social function well enough to market directly to it. The ads from this period don't say, feel better. They say things like take the ouch out of grouch, and for health and good cheer, which is the same message, delivered in a register that nobody has to argue with. It's aspirational without being accusatory. It doesn't imply that you're struggling. It implies that you're about to stop. You're in a room where the last 10 years have happened to everyone present at slightly different angles, and nobody is discussing this. And the glass in your hand agrees that you shouldn't have to. And yet, nobody at this gathering is talking about the lithium. Nobody's ever talked about the lithium. It isn't on the bottle in large print. It isn't the selling point in the way that, say, a modern energy drink lists its ingredients, like a trophy case. It's just quietly there, doing what pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizers do, which is soften the room slightly without anyone being able to explain why the room feels softer. You finish the glass. Someone refills it. The gathering continues. You're not sure if the evening has improved or if you've simply stopped tracking whether it was improving. You have been drinking 7-Up with some regularity for 2 years. So is your neighbour. So is your sister and her husband and the family at the end of the block and a significant portion of the country. None of you have signed a consent form. None of you have been assigned to a control group. Because there is no control group. Because there is no study. There is only a beverage company that has put a pharmaceutical compound into a lemon-lime soda and a nation that is drinking it. No one is tracking dosage. No one is monitoring for side effects. No follow-up survey is planned. History will later describe this as a product launch. Let's talk about scale. By the mid-1930s, 7-Up isn't a niche curiosity sitting on the back shelf next to the liver tonics. It's in drugstores, grocery counters, soda fountains, and family iceboxes across the country. It's being poured for tired workers after a long shift. It's being handed to children with upset stomachs. It's being served at Sunday dinners where nobody comments that everyone at the table seems unusually calm. The participants in this trial number in the millions. Pfizer didn't run a trial this large until the 21st century, and they had paperwork. Now, the dosage situation is worth understanding. Lithium carbonate in the original formula wasn't a trace amount, a novelty mineral, the way some bottled waters today mention magnesium on the label and hope you feel something. It was a real quantity of a real compound with real physiological effects. Therapeutic lithium doses in modern psychiatry are carefully calibrated and monitored with blood tests because too much is toxic and the margin isn't generous. Nobody in 1933 is doing blood tests. Nobody in 1933 is doing much of anything except pouring another glass and noting, privately, that the afternoon feels slightly more manageable than expected. This is where it gets interesting. The effects of lithium don't arrive with fanfare. There's no rush, no obvious signal. It doesn't taste like medicine, because the lemon lime is handling that. It doesn't feel like a drug, because you don't know it is one. What it feels like, if it feels like anything you'd notice, is that the particular sharpness of a bad mood has gone slightly soft at the edges. Your irritation with the broken screen door is present but not urgent. The argument you were planning to have with your brother-in-law seems, on reflection, not worth the energy. This is the clinical effect of a mood stabilizer, experienced as a Wednesday. And yet nobody flags it. Nobody goes to a doctor and says, I've been drinking this soda and I feel statistically more even-tempered. There are no doctors to say it to in that way. There's no language for it. The FDA of this era isn't monitoring beverage ingredients with anything resembling rigor. It's the regulatory equivalent of a strongly worded suggestion box. So the compound moves through the population quietly, doing its work, and the only feedback mechanism is a letters page in a magazine where someone writes in to say the soda helped their husband's disposition, and the company prints it next to an illustration of a cheerful family. Of course, cheerful family is doing a lot of work in those ads. The father's tie is still on. The mother is glowing. The children are quiet, genuinely, suspiciously quiet, in the way children only are when something has chemically intervened or they're planning something. Everyone's holding a glass of 7-Up and beaming with the specific serenity of people who couldn't tell you exactly why they feel fine, but are committed to the feeling. It's the 1930s version of those calm app commercials where a woman sits by a window looking peaceful in activewear. The mechanism is different. The expression is identical. No follow-up is planned. No one writes the paper. The trial simply continues, one bottle at a time, across the decade. You mentioned to a friend at the soda fountain that after a 7-Up, things feel slightly more manageable. Not fixed, not transformed, just marginally quieter in the operational sense, the way a room gets quieter when the loudest conversation in it stops. Your friend says they have noticed the same thing. Your friend means the lemon lime. Your friend isn't wrong. You both agree that it must be the lemon lime, that the lemon lime is the good kind of soda, that there's something about it. This is the correct observation made for the wrong reason. What the lemon lime contains is a pharmaceutical compound used in modern medicine to treat serious mood disorders, and it's working in exactly the way it's supposed to work. You order another. Let's talk about what working actually looks like here. Lithium carbonate doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't produce the warm rush of a cocktail or the electric jolt of a strong coffee. What it does is quieter than that. The background noise of the day, the financial dread, the low hum of worry that's been running since October of 1929 turns down a notch. You don't feel happy. Exactly. You feel like maybe happy is still a possibility later. That's the whole product. That's the clinical outcome delivered in 8 ounces of cold lemon lime over chipped ice, and it's more or less the same promise currently on the label of every $14 CBD soda at the Whole Foods checkout. Now, you and your friend at the fountain aren't the only ones noticing. The soda jerk behind the counter, part bartender, part unlicensed pharmacist, part neighborhood therapist, has been watching people come in, tense, and leave looser for months. He doesn't have a theory about why. He just knows that the 7-Up crowd is a quieter crowd than the cola crowd. A less argumentative crowd. A crowd that tips a little more generously on the way out. He's filed this observation under lemon lime does something and moved on. His diagnostic framework is limited, but his data set is solid. This is where the advertising copy starts to make an uncomfortable amount of sense. Take the ouch out of grouch. For health and good cheer. Boyarain. Nobody planned for the copy to be accurate, and yet here it is, being accurate. A mood stabilizer described in a font chosen to sell soda to families. It's the kind of coincidence that would make a modern pharmaceutical marketing team deeply envious and a modern regulatory body deeply unhappy. Of course, nobody's calling it medicine. The ads show tidy families and smiling babies. The bottles sit next to ginger ale and root beer on the same fountain shelf. The framing is entirely domestic. This is a soda. It's refreshing. It goes with lunch. The fact that it's also quietly adjusting the neurochemical baseline of everyone who drinks it regularly is not on the menu. It's not on anyone's menu. The word available is tonic, which in 1935 means something that's probably good for you, possibly. The bottle does not elaborate. Nobody asks it to. You take a long sip. The ice clinks against the glass. The fountain smells like sugar and soda water and the faint ghost of menthol from the pharmacy shelves behind you. Something in the afternoon settles. You can't say what, exactly. You tell your friend it's probably just the carbonation, that the bubbles do something, that fizz is calming, that lemon lime specifically has a quality. Your friend agrees. You're both right about the feeling and completely wrong about the cause. Outside, the depression is still happening. Inside, the glass is cold. The soda is working, and nobody has any idea why. You have tried the other sodas. The ginger ale, which is fine. The orange phosphate, which is acceptable. The cherry cream soda in the bottle, with the red cap that everyone at the counter seems to like in a way you have never quite matched. And then you drink a 7-Up, and something about it settles differently from the others. And you come back for it the next week, and you keep coming back. And at some point you have become a 7-Up person, which is not an identity you chose so much as one you accumulated. The competing sodas have no pharmaceutical compound in their formulas. This is a competitive disadvantage they will not be able to articulate. Let's talk about brand loyalty, which in 1935 looks nothing like a loyalty program and everything like a body forming a quiet preference it can't explain. You don't decide to be a 7-Up person the way you decide to say, switch to Whole30. You arrive at it sideways, side. Roger. Wide. You have a bad week. You're tired in the specific way that the depression makes everyone tired. Not sleepy, but worn down to a kind of low, persistent hum. You sit at the counter, you order, and something in the glass does what the week didn't. You file this away without filing anything. You just come back. Now, the soda jerk notices. He notices everything from behind that counter, because noticing is most of the job. He sees who orders twice. He sees who comes in tense and leaves slightly less tense. He is not running a clinical trial. He's just a man with a soda gun and a very good memory for faces, which is basically the Yelp review system, but with more eye contact and less typing. Of course, you don't think of yourself as someone who needs a particular soda. That framing would be uncomfortable. You think of yourself as someone who enjoys the taste. Clean, bright, a little sharp, which is accurate. The taste is real. The preference is real. The fact that there's a pharmaceutical mood stabilizer threading through the whole experience is technically also real. One of these facts you know. The other two you don't. You're doing fine. This is where 7-Up does something the competing brands don't. It isn't the most aggressively advertised soda of the era. It isn't the most widely distributed. And yet, it develops a following with the quiet intensity of something that actually does what it says. The ads claim calm. The soda provides calm. The customer returns. The lithium compound does not take a bow. Nobody introduces it. It simply shows up to work every day without being on the schedule. Meanwhile, the competing brands are cycling through new flavors, new bottles, new posters with athletic-looking people suggesting vigor. And you keep ordering the same thing. The cherry cream soda sits there in its red-capped bottle, radiating cheerfulness at you. You remain unmoved. It doesn't have opinions about your nervous system the way 7-Up does. It's just sweet. Sweet is not enough right now. And yet the identity doesn't feel medicinal. It feels like preference. Tick. The modern equivalent is a CBD seltzer that never mentions CBD on the front of the can. The flavor is the brand. The mechanism is the fine print. And the fine print is very small and placed near the bottom, near some other small print about recyclability. You don't tell people you drink 7-Up because it helps. You tell people you like the taste. Both things are true. One of them is doing more work. You don't announce you're a 7-Up person. You just order it. Every time. Without deliberating. The soda jerk already has his hand on the tap before you sit down. That's the whole story, really. The glass arrives. The ice shifts. You take a sip. Something settles. You don't ask why. You go to the soda fountain to find out what is happening. And by what is happening, you do not mean the newspaper. You mean the actual operational news of the neighborhood. The kind that moves between counter stools faster than it moves through any official channel. Who got the job at the factory? Who lost the one at the warehouse? Who has been seen at the doctor's twice this month? Who is fighting with whose brother? And why? The soda jerk has approximately all of this information and will share it in proportion to how long you have been a regular and whether you are the kind of person who listens well. You are working on the listening. Let's talk about what the soda fountain actually is in this moment, functionally speaking. It's a counter, yes. Marble top, oak front, stools that spin if you're patient enough and bored enough to try. But it's also the place where 3 different men told you the factory was hiring before the sign went up. Where someone's aunt learned her landlord had raised rents across the entire block before the letters arrived. Where a foreman found out his crew had already heard he was being replaced. The information ecosystem here would make Reddit look sluggish. And the carbon dioxide is free. The soda jerk is not officially in any information brokering profession. He's there to handle the syrup, manage the carbonation, and slide glasses down the counter with a velocity that suggests either great skill or total indifference. And yet, he knows things. He knows them because this counter is where people sit down with something cold and start talking, which is what people do when they're a little uncomfortable and a little relieved at the same time. You're a little uncomfortable? So the 7-Up is helping with the relief side. This is not a coincidence. Now the geography of the fountain matters. You don't sit anywhere randomly. Hallo's an affair. The stools closest to the door are for people who aren't staying. The middle stools are general population. The far end, near where the soda jerk actually works, that's where the real exchange happens. That's where someone's cousin's job situation gets a full hearing. That's where the information is dense and the ice is refreshed more often because the jerk knows you're going to be a while. You have been seated at the far end for 11 minutes and you've already learned 2 things you didn't know this morning. Of course, none of this is the point of coming in. The point is the drink. You ordered the 7-Up because you wanted the 7-Up, and the conversation is incidental, and the news is incidental, and the fact that your shoulders have dropped 2 inches since you sat down is definitely incidental. The Lithium, doing its quiet institutional work, does not announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just keeps you seated slightly longer than you planned, in a mood slightly more open than you arrived in, which is exactly the kind of atmospheric condition under which people share information they might otherwise keep to themselves. Nobody wrote it down anywhere. Meanwhile, the newspaper is folded under someone's arm 3 stools down and hasn't been opened once. It's there for texture, really, a prop that says, "I'm an informed citizen," while the actual information moves verbally down the counter at roughly the speed of a rumour, which is faster than print has ever managed. The Associated Press would be envious. Nobody at the Associated Press is also handing you a cold glass of something that quietly levels your nervous system, so they're working at a structural disadvantage. You finish the 7-Up. The ice has mostly dissolved. The counter around your glass has a faint wet ring that the soda jerk will wipe away in approximately 4 seconds after you leave, because he's efficient that way. You know more than you did when you walked in. About the neighbourhood. About the factory. About whose brother is the problem. You tip a nickel and stand up, and the stool spins once on its own after you go, like it's acknowledging something. You are 8 years old, and the soda fountain stool is tall enough that your feet hang in the air, which is the same configuration as sitting at a bar, and you're both aware of this, and not allowed to say so. You've been brought here as a Saturday reward, or because it's Saturday, and that's simply what Saturday has come to mean. The soda jerk already knows what you're going to order, because you've been ordering the same thing for 6 months, and the fact that he doesn't ask, just reaches for the glass, is a significant social event in your 8-year-old life. You have a regular order. You're a regular. This is everything. Let's talk about what arrives. It's a 7-Up, poured over chipped ice, in a glass that's too tall for your hand to wrap around comfortably, which you manage anyway, because you're not going to look like a tourist in your own fountain. The carbonation hits first, a sharp citrus hiss that climbs your nose before you've taken a sip. The cold moves through the glass and into your palm. You don't have the vocabulary for lithium carbonate. You don't need it. You know that this specific drink, in this specific glass, on this specific stool, is the version of Saturday that works. Now the soda jerk slides it in front of you without ceremony. He's already moved on. That's correct. A regular doesn't get fussed over. A regular gets acknowledged and then left alone, which is the highest form of respect available at a marble counter in 1938. You've earned a 2-second nod and the absence of small talk. This is basically a Cheers loyalty card, except the prize isn't a free coffee. It's being treated like someone who doesn't need an explanation. Meanwhile, the adults around you are doing adult things, talking too long, circling back to the same complaint, arriving at no conclusions. The Lithium's been doing its quiet work on them for years. On you, it's doing something simpler. It's just making the afternoon feel like it has a shape. Not a dramatic shape. A good one. The kind where the ice melts slowly and nobody needs anything from you for 20 minutes. Of course, you don't know any of this yet. You don't know that the faint mineral undertone you can't quite identify is a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer, or that the FDA is going to quietly remove it from the formula in a decade, or that some future version of you will drink a 7-Up as an adult and think something is missing without being able to name what. You don't know you're participating in what is functionally the largest uncontrolled clinical trial in American consumer history. You're 8, your feet don't reach the floor, the drink is cold and it tastes like Saturday, and that flavour, that specific unrepeatable flavour, is going to stay in you longer than almost anything else from this decade. There's a word for this now. Several words, actually, and at least one peer-reviewed study with a chart. Your brain has stapled a taste to a feeling and filed it somewhere you can't reach on purpose. The 1970s version of this drink won't taste the same. Neither will the 1990s version. You won't be able to explain the difference. You'll just know it's not quite right, the way a song sounds wrong when it's played in the wrong key. The notes are there. Something isn't. But right now the ice is still intact, the stool is still tall, and the soda jerk is ignoring you in exactly the right way. You take a sip. Your feet dangle. Nobody asks you anything. You have been selling beverages that make certain implications for 15 years without anyone in an official capacity requiring you to support those implications. And this has been, from a business perspective, an excellent arrangement. The FDA has been expanding its jurisdiction in increments since 1906, and then more deliberately since 1938, when Congress decided that perhaps ingredients should be disclosed, and perhaps they should not be capable of causing documented harm. The questions are arriving at an angle, not about the soda specifically, not yet, but the pharmaceutical compound in the middle of your ingredient list is getting harder to describe as a mineral without someone asking a follow-up question. Let's talk about what the FDA actually was in 1938. It's not the institution you're picturing. It doesn't have the staff, the budget, or the enforcement teeth of its later decades. It's less the modern FDA, and more a strongly worded letter with a federal seal. But it's growing, and the direction it's growing in is directly toward your product shelf. The 1938 Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act is the one that finally says ingredients matter, that labeling matters, that trust us, it's mineral adjacent, is not a complete answer. The era of Professor Smith's electric elixir and its many cousins is officially, legally over. Now, lithium carbonate isn't aspirin. It isn't caffeine. It's a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer, the kind of compound that, in the decades ahead, gets prescribed in measured doses, with a doctor's supervision and a pharmacist's double check. Dropping it into a lemon-lime soda and calling it a refreshing beverage is, in retrospect, the kind of decision that requires a very particular regulatory blind spot to survive. That blind spot has been closing since 1938. By the mid-1940s, it's basically a squint. This is where the corporate math becomes straightforward. You can fight the regulatory inquiry and invite scrutiny of every ingredient in your history, including the coca leaves and the morphine and the arsenic that characterized your industry's earlier enthusiasms, or you can quietly reformulate. Quietly is doing a lot of work in that sentence. There's no press release. There's no announcement. The lithium simply stops appearing in the recipe sometime around 1948, and the company pivots to new advertising, new mascots, and the general institutional posture of an organization that has never heard of lithium and couldn't find it on a map. This is the Goop approach, except in reverse. Instead of adding dubious ingredients with confident medical language, you remove them with confident silence. And yet the soda tastes different. Not dramatically. Not in a way you can easily argue in a letter to a beverage company. But the 8-year-old who sat at that marble counter every Saturday in 1937 is now a teenager in 1948, and something is subtly, specifically wrong with the glass in front of them. The sharpness is the same. The sweetness is the same. But whatever it was that made the last sip feel like setting something down, that's gone. The brain logged the original formula the way it logs a smell tied to a place. And the place hasn't changed, but the smell has. And nobody's explaining why. Nobody's going to. It is 1948. and the bottle of 7-Up you are holding looks the same as the one you held last year. The label is the same, the colour is the same. The soda jerk serves it, without remark. What has happened without announcement or press release or any communication directed at you specifically is that the lithium carbonate has been removed from the formula following new FDA guidelines that have made its presence in an unlicensed beverage a regulatory problem the company has decided not to argue about. You take a sip. Something is slightly different in the way that a room is different when a piece of furniture has been moved in the night. Nothing is missing that you can name, but the space has changed. Let's talk about what your brain is doing right now, because it's doing something very specific. There is a word for this. Several words, actually, and at least one academic paper with a title nobody outside a university has finished reading. You've been drinking this soda through the depression, through rationing, through the particular exhaustion of living in a decade that did not ask your permission before arriving. The lemon lime was always there. The slight mineral edge underneath it was always there. Your nervous system learned to associate that combination with the particular quality of calm that followed. The bottle cap was the signal. The mood stabilizer was the reward. Your body ran that program every time, without filing any paperwork about it. Now the mineral edge is gone. The soda is still sweet, still cold. Fruity. Still served in the same glass, on the same marble counter. But something in your body notices before your brain does, the way your body notices a wrong note before you've identified the instrument. You don't say anything. The soda jerk doesn't say anything. The company has said, collectively and in writing, absolutely nothing. This is the quietest product change in American beverage history, which is saying something, given that new Coke will eventually happen. Of course you're not going to stop buying it. The bottle is familiar. The brand has spent 2 decades making itself synonymous with calm, with family dinners, with the specific relief of a Tuesday that didn't get worse. The mascot is cheerful. The advertisements still say everybody's happy when there's plenty of 7-Up. You're not going to interrogate that. Nobody is. What you're going to do is drink the new formula and register somewhere in the back of your mind that it used to taste better, or different, or more like something, and you won't be able to say what. Meanwhile, the company is not losing sleep. The rebranding infrastructure is already in motion. New slogans, new campaigns, a fresh push on wholesomeness, without the pharmaceutical subtext that's now a liability. It's the equivalent of a modern brand quietly updating its ingredients list in 6-point font and hoping nobody compares it to the old packaging. Nobody does. The lithium chapter doesn't disappear dramatically. It just stops being mentioned, and then stops being mentioned by people who knew it had been mentioned, until the gap where it used to be is smooth enough that nobody trips on it. And yet the bottle in your hand still hisses when you open it, still pours cold over chipped ice. It still tastes like something your mother gave you when you were sick, when being sick was the one situation that guaranteed someone would sit with you until you felt better. The lithium is gone. The memory it was attached to isn't. That's the part the company didn't engineer. That part just happened on its own. You try to find the old advertisements, the ones that talked about health and doctors and restoring good humour, the ones with the medical adjacent language that seemed so reassuring in 1935. They are harder to locate than they used to be. 7-Up is currently running a campaign about refreshment and crispness and the uncola, which is a rebranding so complete it suggests the previous brand never happened. There are new mascots. There are new slogans. The part where the drink contained a pharmaceutical mood stabilizer and was recommended for babies and given to workers and housewives and students as a daily wellness tonic has become, through the quiet mechanism of not mentioning it, something very close to not having happened. Let's talk about how you erase a chapter. You don't announce it. You don't file paperwork with the public. You simply introduce a cartoon mascot and let the previous 30 years dissolve into the wallpaper. It's the corporate equivalent of putting a throw rug over a stain. Not dishonest, technically, because no one asked about the flaw. The Uncola campaign of the 1960s and 70s repositions, 7-Up, as a clear, independent alternative to Coke and Pepsi, which is a bold pivot when your previous identity was essentially a pharmacy in a bottle. You get the Fido Dido mascot, the green can, the crisp lemon-lime simplicity, clean, unbothered. Lithium? Never heard of her. Now, the beverage industry has always been comfortable with selective memory. Coca-Cola didn't hold a press conference in 1903 to announce it was reducing the cocaine content. It just quietly reduced it, then removed it, then moved on to sponsoring the Olympics. You follow the same timeline with 7-Up. The Lithium comes out in 1948. The ads shift tone. The medical language softens into lifestyle language. Nobody issues a correction. Spy AR Tinu. Nobody sends a letter to the families who'd been pouring it into their sick children's glasses for 2 decades. The soda simply becomes a soda. This is where it gets almost impressive. The original marketing borrowed the authority of medicine without making specific medical claims, close enough to science to feel credible, vague enough to avoid liability. Phrases like restores good humour and for health and good cheer do real emotional work without technically promising anything. There is a word for this now. Several words, actually, and at least one professional certification. When the FDA eventually tightens regulations and the lithium has to go, nothing needs to be retracted. The claims had never been claims. They'd been suggestions, warmly worded, doctor-adjacent suggestions that simply stop appearing one day the way a neighbour moves out without saying goodbye. And yet the old consumers know. Awet hiwiri EU. Not in a way they can articulate at a dinner party, but in the way your body knows when something that used to work has stopped working. Your nervous system registers the subtraction before your brain finds language for it. Sales don't collapse. The brand survives. But something that functioned, quietly and without anyone's full understanding, as a daily pharmaceutical intervention for millions of Americans, is simply discontinued and replaced with carbonated water and artificial flavouring, and the promise that crisp is enough. The bottle doesn't comment on any of this. It just sits there, green and cheerful, radiating refreshment. Meanwhile, you can find the same move in any wellness aisle. CBD sodas, adaptogen sparkling waters, magnesium drinks in pastel cans with fonts that say calm without using the word. The formula is identical to what you just watched happen. Vague science, warm language, a suggestion that this particular beverage might make the day slightly more manageable. The modern versions at least list the ingredient on the label, mostly. The spirit of bib label lithiated lemon lime soda sits quietly in every recess sparkling water and every can of Calm with a trademark symbol, which costs approximately $4 more and arrives in a box with a mindfulness insert. It's just that nobody's adding it to the baby's bottle anymore. Probably. You remember what it tasted like before 1948, and you're willing to say so. The taste now is fine, it's a fine lemon-lime soda. But there was something in the original that landed differently, settled differently, arrived with a quality the current bottle doesn't have. You say this to people, and they tell you that the formula is essentially unchanged, that taste memory isn't reliable, that nostalgia alters the experience of flavour in ways that are documented and well understood. You nod. You say maybe. You're not wrong about this, but the thing you remember isn't a flavour. It's the feeling that accompanied the flavour, which is a different thing entirely, and much harder to argue about. Let's talk about what your brain actually does with a taste it likes. It wires the flavour directly to the emotional state that was present when you first experienced it, so the two become inseparable. You don't just remember the soda, you remember the feeling of the soda. A specific calm. A low-level settling, like a tightly wound thing being gently released. That feeling had a pharmaceutical source. The flavour was just the delivery vehicle. So when the lithium disappeared in 1948 and the formula stayed otherwise intact, the soda remained. The feeling did not. This is where it gets genuinely strange. You're not imagining that something changed. Something changed. It's just that the thing that changed wasn't visible on the label, wasn't announced in the press, wasn't acknowledged by the company in any format that reached you. One day the soda was one thing. The next day, it was a lemon-lime soft drink. The gap between those two descriptions is roughly the size of a mood stabilizer, which isn't a small gap. And yet, when you say the old formula tasted different, you sound like the person insisting that McDonald's French fries were cooked in beef tallow before 1990 and nothing's been right since. You're technically correct. Nobody believes you. The difference is that McDonald's eventually confirmed the beef tallow. 7-Up simply didn't hold a press conference about the lithium. Cock. Now, flavor perception is heavily contextual. Your brain reconstructs taste from a composite of sensory input, emotional state, social setting, and prior expectation. A glass of 7-Up consumed at a soda fountain in 1941, while the soda jerk slides it across a marble counter and the whole room smells faintly of carbonation, and certainty isn't the same neurological experience as the same liquid consumed alone from a plastic cup. The setting does significant work. The soda gets all the credit. Of course, in this particular case, the setting also included an actual pharmaceutical compound that crossed the blood-brain barrier and produced measurable effects on mood. So the memory isn't purely constructed. You're not inventing the calm. You're accurately remembering a calm that the current formula is chemically incapable of producing. There's a difference between misremembering a flavor and correctly remembering a drug that was quietly removed from it. One of these involves faulty recall. The other involves a company decision made in 1948 that nobody wrote to you about. Meanwhile, the modern equivalent of this situation is every person who insists their grandmother's recipe tasted better, and the reason turns out to be that their grandmother used full-fat butter and didn't tell anyone. The recipe is the same, the ingredient is gone. The taste memory is faithful. The explanation was withheld. 7-Up fits this template almost exactly, except instead of butter, it's a psychiatric medication, which is a meaningful difference, mostly in terms of paperwork. What you're left with is a loss that doesn't have a category, the loss of a feeling you couldn't name at the time, tied to a flavor you can still taste, delivered by a company that would very much prefer you stop bringing it up. The soda is still cold. It still hisses when you open it. The ice still cracks against the glass. Everything is present except the one thing that made you feel, briefly and inexplicably, fine. Your brain has done something to the taste of 7-Up that the 7-Up company did not ask it to do and cannot control. It has filed every bottle you ever drank in the category of things that made the difficult years more manageable. The break in the long shift, the afternoon when the rent was paid by the narrowest margin, the Saturday morning when nothing was wrong yet and the counter stool was high and the glass was cold. Psychologists call this hedonic flavor memory, which is a formal name for the brain's tendency to transfer emotional states onto the sensory conditions that accompanied them. You call it 7-Up. Every sip carries the whole file. This isn't unique to 7-Up. It's what the brain does with anything that showed up reliably during hard times and didn't make things worse. The lemon-lime flavor isn't the memory. It's the index. The actual stored content is the specific quality of okayness that settled in after the first few swallows, the shoulders dropping, the jaw unclenching, the afternoon becoming slightly more survivable. That quality had a chemical source. The brain tagged the flavor as the address, filed the feeling behind it, and moved on without telling you. It did not send a confirmation email, and it didn't ask for permission. Now let's talk about what that means for you, the one who grew up drinking the original formula, and then, after 1948, kept reaching for the same bottle, expecting the same result. You weren't being sentimental. You weren't imagining a difference. The product had genuinely changed, and your brain knew it, even when the label didn't say so. The soda looked identical. The color was right. The carbonation hissed the same way, but the emotional payload wasn't there. It's the equivalent of opening a Tylenol bottle and discovering it's been replaced with Tic Tacs. The shape is familiar. The effect is not. Of course, nobody at 7-Up was going to explain this. The Lithium chapter wasn't in the press release. There was no announcement, no reformulation notice, no apology printed on the side of the bottle in small text. The drink was simply 7-Up, the same as it had always been, except for the part where it wasn't. And the consumers who noticed, who kept insisting something had changed, that it tasted off, that it used to be different, were easy to dismiss as nostalgic or confused. People are very easy to dismiss when the corporation holds the paperwork. Meanwhile, the flavor memory stayed in place. The brain doesn't update its files just because the formula changed. It keeps the original emotional association intact and keeps expecting it to be reproduced. Every subsequent bottle became a minor disappointment the brain didn't have language for. You just knew it wasn't quite the same. You kept buying it anyway. The file was still there, the counter stool, the cold glass, the Saturday morning when nothing was wrong yet. The brain keeps those, like a Spotify algorithm that still recommends the song from the year everything fell apart. It's thorough like that, even when the product isn't. By the mid-1950s, there is a new kind of soda available, and it contains no calories, no lithium, and no ingredient with any measurable effect on your neurochemistry. It is marketed as modern, which in this context means it has removed things and called the removal an improvement. You drink it in the same glass over the same ice, with the same habit built over the same years. The advertising still promises refresh and clarity, and a feeling of restored equilibrium after the long day. The mechanism by which a drink with no active ingredient will deliver any of these things is not explained, because there is not a mechanism. The can is cold, you drink it. The afternoon continues either way. Let's talk about what diet soda is actually selling. It's not flavor. It's not calories. It's a small transaction. You chose the one with fewer numbers on the label, and the choosing is supposed to feel like something. A Peloton subscription works the same way. So does an $18 cold brew with an adaptogen shot? So does every wellness brand founded between 2015 and now? The ritual stays. The active ingredient was optional, apparently. Now. The can itself has opinions about this. It's lighter than the original glass bottle. It makes a different sound, a thin metallic pop, instead of the deep glass hiss that meant something was actually happening. The carbon dioxide is still there, doing its best. But carbonation alone isn't a mood stabilizer. It's just aggression in liquid form. You swallow it anyway, because the afternoon is still there, and it still needs managing. This is where the marketing pivots, quietly and without apology. The original 7-Up promised calm through chemistry, and delivered it, accidentally, via lithium carbonate. The diet version arrives with fewer calories and the same slogan, which is either very confident or a complete coincidence. The delivery system doesn't work. Nobody says this out loud at the time. Of course, the ads update accordingly. The impossibly tidy family is still there, but now you're watching your figure. Your tie is still on. The children are still improbably quiet, though no longer being offered the drink directly, because someone somewhere noticed the baby ads and had a quiet word, a very quiet word, delivered with a smile, at a meeting nobody officially called. The visual grammar is identical. The bottle just has fewer things in it. Meanwhile, the soda jerk at the pharmacy counter is being replaced by a vending machine. The vending machine doesn't know your name, doesn't ask about your knee, doesn't remember that you prefer your ice on the side. It accepts your coins and dispenses a can with the warm emotional engagement of a parking meter. You take the can, you find somewhere to sit. The ritual of the soda fountain, the marble counter, the glass sliding toward you, the small performance of being cared for, is gone. What's left is a cold aluminium cylinder and the tab you pull back with your thumb. And yet the soda still sells, in enormous quantities, because the brain doesn't need the lithium to remember that lemon-lime flavor once meant something. The can is still cold. The ice is still there. The afternoon is still long, and the day is still heavy, and somewhere in your nervous system there's a file that says, this is the part where things get slightly better, The file is wrong now. It's been wrong since 1948. You open another one anyway. You are standing in a grocery store aisle in the present day, and the refrigerated section contains a drink with CBD, a drink with ashwagandha, a drink with reishi mushroom, and one described on its label as a mood-supporting adaptogenic sparkling beverage in a font that implies the designer meditates regularly. Each one promises to support something: clarity, calm, focus, resilience, or in one case simply good vibes, which is a clinical term that has not yet been formally submitted. The label does not specify how much support, or in which direction, or for how long. The 1929 7-Up ad did not specify either. The shelf has changed, the sentence has not. Let's be clear about what you're looking at. This is not a new idea in a new bottle. This is a very old idea in a slightly taller, more expensive bottle with a QR code that links to a wellness blog written by someone who's also selling a journal. The mustachioed man behind the pharmacy counter with his doctor. Bliss Brain Restorer didn't have Instagram, but the pitch is identical. Something in here will help you feel better than you currently do, and the specific mechanism is your problem to worry about. He's the direct ancestor of every CBD sparkling water on this shelf. Head recognized the font immediately. Now, the ashwagandha drink costs $4.79 and contains 11 milligrams of an adaptogenic root extract that clinical studies describe as potentially beneficial under certain conditions. The 1930s 7-Up contained actual pharmaceutical-grade lithium carbonate and cost a nickel. You're not necessarily getting a better deal. You're getting better graphic design and a smaller dose of whatever optimism the manufacturer felt comfortable printing without triggering an FDA inquiry. The label says feels supported. Supported by what isn't listed. It's doing the same careful sidestep 7-Up's ad team perfected in 1935, borrowing the language of science without making any specific promises science would have to keep. Of course, the wellness drink industry is worth over $100 billion. It makes the patent medicine era look like a local craft fair. What used to be sold behind a glass pharmacy counter in amber bottles is now a dedicated grocery aisle with its own refrigeration unit and an ambient playlist you can't turn off. The soda jerk is gone. In his place is a touchscreen self-checkout that doesn't ask how you're doing and can't recommend anything for a tired Thursday. Nobody's filling in that gap. The drinks are trying. Meanwhile, somewhere in that aisle, there's a bottle of regular 7-Up. Green label, same lemon-lime promise, no lithium since 1948, no adaptogen, no ashwagandha, no mood-supporting anything. Just carbonation and citrus flavoring and 75 years of brand memory doing the emotional heavy lifting on its own. Some people buy it because they're nauseous. Some people buy it because their grandmother gave it to them cold over chipped ice when they were sick, and their brain filed that sensation under safe and never moved it. The lithium's been gone for decades. The feeling hasn't gotten the memo. A man named Charles Grigg put lithium in a lemon-lime soda in 1929 and sold it to you, or someone exactly like you, frightened, exhausted, wanting a cold drink that promised, vaguely but sincerely, that things were going to be fine. The label designers and the adaptogen sourcing teams and the reishi mushroom suppliers have all read the same memo. There is a word for what they are selling. Several words, actually, and at least one industry certification. The bottle doesn't mention any of them. The drink in your hand right now is making the same promise the nickel soda made in 1929. You reach for it anyway. You have been the target of some version of this offer for a very long time. The beverage that will restore your equilibrium, the tonic that will take the ouch out of the grouch, the can that will support your mood in the direction of better. The names and the ingredients and the fonts change with the decade, but the transaction on offer is always the same. You give money, you receive something cold and carbonated, and the label implies that what follows will be an improvement on what came before. Sometimes it is, not always for the reason stated, and not always through the mechanism advertised, but the human desire to feel slightly more okay than you currently do is a constant, and someone has always been willing to bottle it. Let's be clear about what that desire actually looks like in practice. It's a man in 1931 handing over a nickel at a marble counter because the week has been long and the news has been bad and the rent is due, and someone across the counter is offering him a fizzing glass of lemon lime and suggesting, not in so many words, that things might feel different after. It's a tired housewife in 1938 pouring 7-Up over chipped ice for a sick child because it's cold and sweet and something about it feels medicinal, which is not entirely wrong. It's you, right now, reaching for whatever's in your fridge at 11 o'clock because the day has accumulated and your nervous system would like a word. The ritual hasn't changed. The ingredients have. Now, there's a version of this story where someone points a finger at the pharmaceutical men who put lithium in a soda and sold it as cheerfulness in a bottle, at the ad writers who put smiling babies in magazines, at the beverage companies who quietly removed the active ingredient in 1948 and hoped nobody would ask. You could be annoyed about all of that. It's a reasonable position, and yet you weren't being fooled into wanting something you didn't want. You wanted exactly what was advertised. You wanted to feel okay. You were cold and tired and living through a depression, literal and economic, and someone offered you something cold and fizzy and vaguely promising, and you said yes. That's not a con. That's Tuesday. The lithium is gone now. Has been since Truman was president. The soda jerk is gone too, replaced by a refrigerated case and a self-checkout machine that doesn't know your name or your problems and can't slide a glass down a counter with any particular warmth. The wellness drink aisle at Whole Foods will sell you something called Recess or Olipop, which promises calm through a different proprietary blend, at roughly $8 a can, which is either progress or the same transaction with better kerning. The can is still cold. The label still implies improvement. You still open it at the end of a hard day and listen to the hiss. Somewhere in the 1930s, an entire nation was drinking a pharmaceutical-grade mood stabilizer out of a glass bottle and calling it refreshment. You didn't know. The companies knew more than they said, and the FDA knew less than it should, and the net result was the largest accidental clinical trial in American history, conducted in soda fountains across the country, with no ethics board and complimentary chipped ice. Nobody signed a waiver. The results were inconclusive. But you reported feeling, on average, slightly better. Not fixed, not cured, just a little more able to get through the afternoon. The bottle gets redesigned every decade or so. The font changes. Someone in a conference room decides the old label feels dated, and the new label feels like wellness. And the distinction between those two things is a trademark and about $400,000 in focus group research. You buy the new one. It's cold. The label implies improvement. You open it, you listen to the hiss, and somewhere between the first sip and the last, the afternoon becomes slightly more survivable. The soda fountain knew that first. It just charged a nickel and didn't make a thing of it. You open a cold drink. Whatever is in it, whatever the label promises, whatever the advertising has decided this particular formulation will do for your afternoon, you open it, and you take a sip, and something in the day recedes, just slightly, the way it always has. Not the lithium specifically, and not the lemon lime, and not the marble counter, or the soda jerk, or the 1935 advertisement with the improbably contented family. It was about the pause. The breath, the small daily permission to stop managing everything for 30 seconds and just hold something cold and let the fizz settle. Let's be clear about what actually happened here. A man in 1929 put a pharmaceutical mood stabilizer into a lemon lime soda, launched it 2 weeks before the stock market collapsed, and accidentally handed an entire nation a small daily dose of calm during the worst decade of their lives. It's the most consequential accidental product launch in American history, and it's marketed today as a mixer for your rum. The lithium is gone. The marble counters are gone. The soda jerk who knew your name and your usual order and whether your mother was feeling better is also gone. What's left is a green can and a vague sense that something about it should feel more significant than it does. Now, the brain doesn't particularly care about historical accuracy. It cares about flavor memory, and flavor memory is stubborn. Some people who drank the original formula and lived long enough to notice the 1948 reformulation said it tasted different afterward. You weren't wrong about that. It was different. The lithium had a flavor, faintly mineral, subtly flat, and without it the drink was technically identical, and experientially not. Your brain had filed the original under a very specific emotional category, and then the product changed and the category was suddenly empty. That's the Mandela effect, but with pharmaceutical-grade carbonation. Meanwhile, nothing has actually changed. The CBD soda you're drinking because you saw an ad promising calm in every can is doing the same thing the 1931 7-Up ad did when it told a tired housewife that this particular fizzy beverage would take the ouch out of her grouch. The language is different. The regulatory infrastructure is technically larger, but the transaction is identical. Someone is selling you a bottled version of OK, and you are buying it because you'd like to feel slightly more OK than you currently do, which is a completely reasonable thing to want. Stanley Tucci has an entire travel show built on that premise, and it does very well. And yet it's hard to be cynical about any of this while you're actually holding the cold bottle. The hiss when you open it, the way the carbonation hits the back of your throat, the temperature of the glass against your palm. These aren't nothing. They're not lithium, but they're not nothing. Somewhere in 1933, someone sat down after a genuinely terrible week. Genuinely terrible, not metaphorically terrible, the kind of terrible where you weren't sure about the electricity, and opened a 7-Up and felt, briefly, like things might be manageable. The soda helped, the lithium helped, the pause helped. It's hard to rank which one was doing the most work. The drink gets cold, the fizz settles. You set it down somewhere near you, and the day stays where you put it for a little while longer. The can sits there, satisfied with its contribution, saying nothing. You spent the night watching a country self-medicate with carbonated syrup, trusting mustachioed men with no licenses and bottles labelled things like electric elixir, and concluding, collectively, nationally, that fizzy water with a dubious past was basically fine medicine. Those people were genuinely trying. They were exhausted, sick, or just having a bad decade, and the best option available came in a glass bottle with a cork and tasted faintly of something promising. They drank it, hopefully. That's not nothing. Your version involves none of that guesswork. No unlicensed pharmacist. No chipped ice and a prayer. Just a mattress that cost real money, a pillow that has your specific dent in it, and a blanket that knows you. Settle back into it now. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day go flat, the way all the bubbles do eventually. Sleep well.